Have you ever taken the same street so many times that you could walk it with your eyes closed? That's how familiar my route home was. I knew every crack in the pavement, every leaning mailbox, every flickering street lamp that marked the way back, like a private constellation lighting up ordinary life. That night began as all the others, predictable, reassuring, absolutely unremarkable. But in the span between one crosswalk and the next, something shifted. It was so subtle at first I almost missed it. The world, my world, started to rewrite itself. My footsteps echoed over the damp asphalt. The air was unusually heavy, thicker somehow, with the kind of silence you only notice when it's broken. I glanced at my phone. The battery hovered at 50% and the time glowed. 10:12 p.m. Nothing seemed unusual, but I felt a twitch of unease. Maybe it was the weather, maybe just fatigue. I shook off the sensation and headed toward the familiar corner store, expecting to see its bright open sign and the cluster of bikes chained out front. But when I arrived, the facade was different. The sign was gone, replaced with a faded painting of a sunflower. The shop was closed, shuttered, windows covered with grime. I glanced at the door, expecting perhaps a renovations notice, but the glass was bare. I pulled out my phone, checked the GPS. It insisted I was at the right location, but the street name displayed was wrong. Close, but not quite, a single letter off. I frowned, refreshing the map, watching as the blue dot hiccuped and drifted a meter to the left. Determined not to let my mind play tricks, I continued onward. The next landmark should have been a little park with a red bench where teens gathered on late summer nights. I found only a patch of dirt, circled by wildflowers and stray wrappers. My heart beat a little quicker, not enough to worry, just enough to feel out of sync. The lamp across the street flickered, then died, plunging the intersection into a dim haze. I forced myself to keep walking. At the next block, the turnoff to my road was gone. In its place, a narrow alley twisted away between strangers' fences. It looked familiar, but not right. The fence slats were painted green instead of brown. I hesitated, just a minute, maybe two, then convinced myself to follow, rationalizing it by the layout of modern city designs and the mess of urban development. The alley dead-ended at another street, one I had never seen before. Behind me, the way back was shrouded in darkness. My fingers tightened around my phone. The GPS now spun in confusion, refusing to settle on a direction. Something cold curled inside me. "This doesn't make sense," I muttered aloud. I dialed my roommate, hoping to hear a reassuring voice, a laugh, a joke, a simple, "You're just tired." The call failed. No bars, no service. The icons on my screen danced and flickered, as if mocking my certainty. My mind reached for explanations. Maybe construction, maybe a detour, maybe even a power outage. But the streets never looked like this, the proportions wrong, as if the city had been stretched and reshaped just for me. The silence around me was a shade deeper. I heard my shoes scrape the pavement louder than usual. Ahead, a man shuffled by, eyes locked on his shoes, unwilling to meet my gaze. "Excuse me," I called. My voice sounded thin, brittle. He didn't stop, didn't even flinch. It was as if I was invisible. I spun in place. The air grew colder, and a subtle current drifted through the empty streets, picking up scraps of old newspaper and swirling them in uneven circles. I started to jog, retracing my steps, hoping to spot something. A cafe, a parked car, anything that would restore reality's familiar texture. But every glance revealed another discrepancy. A building that had always been red was now silver. A wall mural faded into streaks. I tried my GPS again. The signal blinked, offering a blue dot swimming uselessly in a white field. Roads unnamed, routes uncertain. Another intersection. I recognized nothing. I told myself it was impossible to get lost here, not after years in this neighborhood. Yet at that moment, the map in my memory and the world under my feet were at war. Anxiety rose in my throat, sharp and relentless. I kept moving, unwilling to stand still long enough to admit that I didn't know where I was. A sudden wind rattled a chain-link fence nearby, and I caught a faint scent of rain, though the sky was perfectly clear. There was a sound almost too quiet to catch, like a radio's static, fading in and out behind the normal city noises. I paused, listening, but it slipped away. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. Maybe I thought this was what liminality felt like. The space between places, between realities. My phone's clock ticked ahead. 10:27 p.m. In 15 minutes, the world had fractured for me. And then, as I made one last desperate turn, I found myself where I'd started. The street with the sunflower sign and the broken lamp. But nothing felt familiar anymore. Would you have kept going? Or turned back, hoping the world would remember who you are? Still trying to convince myself this was all just exhaustion, I took a steadying breath and looked around for a clue. A sign, a street name, any familiar reference point. Nothing. The night seemed deeper here. Shadows pooled in the corners where streetlights didn't reach. I checked my phone again. Now the GPS spun desperately. Not just misnaming streets, but erasing them. Blank space dominated the map. I zoomed out. My location floated off any known grid, the roads fragmenting like broken glass. Questions stormed through my mind. Was I sleepwalking? Was this some elaborate city prank I'd never heard about? I pressed onward, fighting the urge to panic. The buildings lining the street felt as if they were closing in, their windows covered by dusty blinds, their doors uninviting and unfamiliar. My footsteps seemed to echo louder in this enclosed hush, each step drawing me deeper into a place both eerily familiar and utterly foreign. I tried to retrace my path, turning left then right, searching for anything that would lead me back. Instead, the streets looped, inexplicably folding in on themselves. Twice I passed a crooked mailbox I was sure I'd only seen once before. In the distance, a church bell chimed the half-hour, but the sound was flat, hollow, as if it traveled from far across a deserted city. Desperate, I messaged 2 friends. The first reply pinged, then vanished before I could open it. The second never was delivered. My signal faded to one trembling bar, wavering as if undecided whether to stay or leave. Any idea of reaching out, of being tethered to the world I thought I knew, began to feel hopeless. That's when I noticed a figure ahead. A young woman standing under the fractured light of a bus stop. Her posture was tense, glancing over her shoulder at the empty road behind her. Instinct overruled caution. I called out softly, voice husky with uncertainty. She hesitated, then moved closer. "I've been wandering for an hour," she whispered, eyes wide. "Every turn brings me back here. The buildings, they aren't how I remember." Relief washed over me, sharp and strange. I wasn't alone in the madness. We compared mental maps, describing landmarks that either looked subtly wrong or had simply disappeared. Together, we tried walking in unison, using my malfunctioning GPS as a feeble guide, but it only confirmed our confusion. We made a game of naming street signs, but none matched our recollections. The city, or whatever it was now, felt infinite and unfinished. Time began to bend. Our phones insisted only 7 minutes had passed, but we both felt the drag of an hour or more. The moon arced, unhurried above the warped skyline, the sky a color I'd never quite seen, a bruised shade halfway between midnight and dawn. Stores we recognized by silhouette had curious new names painted hastily over old ones, the letters uneven, some reversed. A cafe that once served as our meeting place was now a darkened pharmacy, its windows reflecting nothing but darkness. At some point, lights flickered in random bursts. Street lamps one moment, neon signs the next, never in sync. We heard distant laughter floating from nowhere, as if the city taunted us with the idea of company. I tried to jog her memory. She finished my sentences, but we both felt details slip away as quickly as we named them. Then we stumbled onto a playground. The swings twisted and creaked in windless air, and at the center, a rusted merry-go-round spun slowly, pushed by nothing, making a metal moan that scraped at my nerves. "Do you remember this place?" she asked. "I played here as a kid," I replied, although a part of me doubted it had even existed before tonight. We sat, weighing our next move, watching as colors in the sky shifted from one impossible hue to another. On a whim, she pulled out an old photo. Us, at this playground years ago. But the background was wrong. The trees were thicker. The street wasn't visible. I showed her a picture too. In mine, the playground's fence had never been red, yet now under the streetlight it gleamed with peeling crimson paint. Exhaustion set in. We resolved to keep moving, believing that somewhere a seam would open, and we'd slip back into the world we thought we remembered. But with every step, the city changed a little more. Familiar places lost their shape until we began to doubt the order of time itself. Had we entered the labyrinth together by accident? Or were we always fated to wander these vanishing roads side by side? Would you trust your memories? Or follow the map only your heart can read? We pressed forward, each step heavy with the growing fear that the city around us was remaking itself for our confusion. Dawn approached by the color of the sky, yet not a single bird sang, nor did the world move toward any true morning. Our hope rested on instinct alone, a fragment of trust that somewhere, some detail would break the cycle and guide us out. The streets bled into one another. Familiar avenues, now warped at wrong angles, dissolved into empty boulevards, lined by houses that felt both new and ancient. My companion suggested we abandon the unpredictable GPS entirely. "Let's map it ourselves," she said, and pulled a pen from her pocket. On the corner of an old takeout menu, we began to draw, sketching every street, turn, and strange corner we'd passed. With each intersection, we dropped a marker, bits of trash, a bent coin, a lost glove. But the further we ventured, the more our markers vanished behind us, just like the proper names had on the map. At some point, even our marks on the paper began to blur and fade, notes transforming between our glances, as if the city refused to be referenced. Shops opened and closed as we approached. One moment a bakery, with the aroma of fresh bread so sharp it stung my empty stomach. The next a closed barber shop, the air now thick with the scent of powder and old perm solution. A child's rubber ball bounced once along the gutter, but I never saw the child it belonged to. We made for the river, sure its wide banks would ground us. The bridge we remembered was there, but rotted, planks missing, splitting the water in two. It looked abandoned for decades, not months. She gripped my arm tight. "How can everything that was once so normal be gone?" she whispered. I had no answer. Backtracking, we passed a statue in the Central Park, certain it had always been of a horse. But now, in the foggy pre-dawn, it was a man, nameless, face turned away. Around us, the city paused, then seemed to sigh like a beast disappointed in our persistence. Suddenly her phone rang, a shrill, ordinary sound in a world turned unreal. A man's voice, confused, panicked, asking, "Where are you?" "We've been looking. You left half an hour ago." The call cut out before her reply. A memory shuddered through me. My own apartment. The scent of coffee, the creak of my old desk chair, the shallow dent in the doorway from where I'd dropped my keys. Could those things still exist? If I could just reach them, maybe everything would reset. Without another word, we ran. The cityscape flowed around us, not resisting, not assisting, merely shifting as we moved. My companion's breath mingled with mine, our footsteps out of sync but desperate, hearts thudding loud enough to fill empty streets. Without warning, we burst through an alleyway and found ourselves outside my apartment building, a little dirtier, a bit older, with a mailbox that was newly painted yellow. We stared. It was the right address, but everything felt off. A neighbor's bicycle was now a scooter. The lover's graffiti on the wall had changed to unfamiliar initials. I stepped toward the door, tried my keys. They slipped into the lock but wouldn't turn. My name on the doorbell label was misspelled. A pressed flower was taped to the door, a flower I'd never seen, but it stirred a fierce nostalgia, as if from someone else's life. My companion checked her phone. All her recent calls and texts had vanished, replaced by numbers she didn't recognize. She showed me a photo, us in a park, but our faces were blurred and unplaceable, as if taken in a rush or in someone else's memory. We stood in silence, watching a pale sun fight through a clouded sky. Around us, life resumed. Neighbors passed, dogs barked, a delivery van rumbled by. Everyone acted as if we'd always belonged, as if nothing had changed. But I knew better. So did she. We had come back, but not entirely. The world allowed it, yes, but on its own terms. Not everything had returned with us. Not everything ever would. Every detail, every changed letter, every missing object, every inexplicable nostalgia felt like a secret meant only for us. I realized I might never trust what I saw again, and wondering if I was truly home, or somewhere just close enough to fool me, I whispered into the unsettled dawn, "Do you ever get the feeling that the world has quietly shifted, and only you and a stranger are left to remember how things used to be?"